Hello and welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Jim Lukaszewski, author of Why Should the Boss Listen to You? Why should the boss listen to you?
Good question.
Thanks. Good question, right. Thanks for being on the show, Jim.
My pleasure, thank you.
Before we go to Why Should the Boss Listen to You, which really talks more about how to be a good number two, I'd like to start with the number one.
Okay.
Tell me something. What's wrong with our leaders today? It seems like it's hard to find a good leader.
Well, I think there are two things that we're seeing, and they have been around for some time. One is that compensation for these people is out of control.
Exactly.
And it's irritating a lot of people, as it should.
And my show's called Getting Your Money's Worth.
Right.
So, I mean, the
They're
conversation,
the only ones getting their money's worth.
the conversation is way out of control.
It is.
And there seems to be no relationship between productivity or accomplishment and money earned.
I mean, the only relationship is they have a golden parachute, a platinum parachute, and whether they do well or ill, they get paid. The rest of us don't live that way.
So that's one thing that really is very hard for people to accept.
Right.
But let's talk. But the performance of leaders. Mm-hmm. It seems to be an epidemic that leaders are not performing as leaders.
Well, there are two things. They're not performing as business managers. They're not performing as leaders as well.
Right.
And the issue really, in fact, we are changing CEOs more rapidly than we ever have in our history. And part of it is because there's such a premium on performance these days, and also on the time to get the job done. Now, the irritating part is no matter how long they're on the job, whether 6 months or 9 months or 9 years, they get this huge compensation, for no time. Right. For example, if they don't get the job done, they're out of there.
Right.
And the way there's no incentive to really get the job done because they're going to get paid no matter what. Right. The second thing is there is really a slippage in the integrity department. We really have. This is a business school issue, actually. We teach these people to be so measurement oriented. If you can't metricize it, can't count it, can't somehow add it into an equation of some kind, it doesn't matter. And when you eliminate something that's not countable, you eliminate things like people and emotion and integrity. Yeah. So we're going down this path, and we have been for almost 30 years, of this more scientific approach to management, and we keep separating ourselves from the things that most people care about.
I want to ask you something, Jim.
Sure.
Is the culture corrupting the person, or does the person come with shady morals to begin with?
I think what's become acceptable is what we call parking lot ethics, okay? You drive into work in the morning.
Parking lot ethics,
right.
Okay.
When you get out of your car, you leave your family ethics in the car, you go into business in the office, and suddenly you make decisions that you wouldn't even think of telling your 9-year-old daughter about.
I used to work for an icon in business, and he had a firm belief that you can't separate the man from the job. That if a person was a good person in his family and in life, he'd be a good person in business. Are you saying that no longer is so?
I think actually, when you think about it, you have to say, I guess you'd say, what is a good person to start with? What's that definition? But I think a lot of people who work in business are really good people. But the higher you go in the organization, the stresses are different, the strains are different, the expectations are different, and suddenly your sense of clarity in terms of what's right and what's wrong is changed. Because in many cases you have to do whatever it takes to get something done. That changes your ethics. If the board says to you, look, you want that bonus, you have to perform this month or this quarter, you turn around and tell the people who report to you, hey Judith, I want those numbers this month. Do whatever it takes to get it done. That's an indicator that good doesn't matter. It's getting the job done that matters.
So the truth of the matter is greed takes over.
Greed takes over.
Greed takes over.
It's a mentality that takes over. Right. It is greed, but it's more complicated than in the sense that there is this mentality, and it sounds really maybe strange to talk about it, but this is what they've been trained to do. We train these people to say essentially, you add some people, you add some materials, you add some resources, you add some markets, and you stir them up, and voila, you have a successful product, a successful process, a successful company. That's a chemical experiment. Nothing works that way in real life. There's no end point. It's not as cut and dried as it's done in management school. So I'm saying really the issue here is we're being taught to expect outcomes that will never occur.
And certainly not when the window of time for accomplishment is shortened. Okay. All right. Well, you study and you teach people how to be able to do.
Right.
So that's a big job for you, because we've talked about what's wrong with the whole culture, number one. How can you expect number two to be able to have the boss listen to him?
Actually, I spend most of my time teaching number ones to be better number ones.
So you do
or really helping them solve the problems they've gotten themselves into. Yeah. But in the process, helping them is one thing, but also helping those around them. Those are going to be there when I leave, tomorrow. To understand what needs to be done is equally important.
Well, Jim, let's talk about the time now.
Yep.
Let's talk about these corporations. I mean, this whole thing. Is there something wrong with the boards of directors? Is that where does the problem start? You say this culture, but the culture is no more than the mindset of the people that are in it.
Well, a culture it's more than a mindset. A culture really is a set of expectations, and the board has its own expectations. The company, the marketplace has its expectations, and the person in the middle of all that is the CEO. In fact, in the book I talk about the stresses and strains they're under. In the old days, whenever they were, maybe 25 years ago, a CEO job was the pinnacle of your career. You got that job. And basically, this is what you did. And
you won the lottery.
Right. It was all business. You were famous. You were in magazines. You were giving money away. And you attended business meetings and made decisions. Today, more than a third of every CEO's job is taken with what I call non-operating problems. Right. If they've got an angry employee, okay, HR used to take care of that. Today,
HR, human resources.
The CEO's got to deal with it. Look at Congress. I mean, when Congress wants to talk to a company or an industry, they don't call in the head of HR or the head of manufacturing.
No,
they call the CEO. This is new. This is a change over the last few years. They've changed the law. Sarbanes-Oxley, you've heard of that.
Yes.
I mean, this is really an effort to codify and criminalize executive behavior.
Right, exactly.
So I'm just saying a lot of interesting pressures have come into play on these people for which they're not trained. They're still only trained to deal with these experiments.
So the truth of the matter is, when all is said and done, it comes down to a people problem in the business?
It comes down to really understanding how people think, how people work, what the patterns are, and that's what we really talk about in the book, this whole concept of understanding where things are going to go, how things are going to happen, decisions that have to be made.
So really, shouldn't a CEO that wants to be ethical, that wants to do the right thing by himself, first off, and by his employees and his shareholders, we've forgotten to even mention the shareholders who get hurt all the time in this, shouldn't he have some parameters, some say about his deliverables? After all, if the CEO accepts things to deliver that are impossible to deliver, who's to blame?
Well, the board's to blame. And basically, the number one reason why CEOs lose their job is they failed to deliver on what they promised when they got the job.
Well, maybe they shouldn't have been making that promise, Jim.
Well, they have to make the promise to get the job,
they
I
wouldn't
presume.
get the job.
Sure.
Right.
Exactly.
So, right.
When it comes to the number two person, though, that number two person's job is really to understand what the deliverables are and make certain that we stay focused on getting that done within a framework which is acceptable, both to the publics, the customers, the shareholders, and others.
Let's shift gears for a minute. Can leadership be taught?
Yes.
I mean, you teach.
It can be learned.
It can be. It's a learned behavior.
That's right.
Really, it's not a gut, a passion. It's a learned.
I think there are people who
There's
as in every profession, who are more
natural leader. He's a natural leader.
Well, I don't think I've ever met a natural leader.
Really?
I've met people who understand the dynamics of people, who understand how people think and how people work and how to make people get things done. But you can learn that. These are skills.
So what is there?
Do
you have a training program where you actually sit down and teach people how to be a leader?
Yes.
What's the first thing you teach?
Actually, what I teach are what I call the ingredients of leadership.
So tell me, we're called giving a mind. What's the first most important ingredient of leadership?
To be a positive person. That is to talk in positive language.
Okay.
The reason that's important is because negative language miscommunicates and confuses everybody.
And breeds more negativity.
Exactly.
Okay, so a positive, upbeat person.
Second thing is to be a constructive person, meaning essentially...
Does that mean you can't criticize?
It means you stop criticizing, and if you're going to offer some suggestion to someone, that's what you do. If you can't offer a suggestion, you move on to something else. Criticism is negative. Criticism actually...
So you don't say that's a bad job. You say the job could have been better if you had done blah, blah, blah.
You can even say, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would have done. You could say, here's another way to do it. There are lots of options.
Doesn't that mean that you're being accepting of mediocrity if you don't...
Actually, what you're doing is you're giving people instructions on how to serve you as the leader, which is what you need. Want them to get it done. You can't, if you say, don't do it that way, what kind of teaching is that? They have not, they know not, they don't know what to do.
You haven't helped the team help you.
Right.
Okay.
Third thing they have to do is to be what I call outcome focused. In other words, leaders really, well, leaders, first of all, leaders are people of tomorrow. Their job is to go over the horizon, see what's out there, set some new destinations for the organization.
So they have to focus on the future.
That's correct. And so the third job is really to get to the future as soon as possible. So the idea here is that when we're talking about things, planning things, evaluating things, we're always evaluating them in terms of how they get us to tomorrow, as opposed to how we should have done them yesterday. Those sorts of things.
Is it transferable? If a person is a good businessman, can that person transfer those skills and be a good politician?
Yes. It could be a good father, be a good whatever.
So those skills are transferable across
in fact, I actually work in many different professions, and these same ingredients I'm talking about with you work for everyone else. These are patterns of success in leadership.
They can help you be a good parent.
Absolutely.
Or a good spouse.
In fact, if you were to follow these 11 principles, these 11 ingredients.
So we mentioned the top 3.
Yes, we did. Your life will change. In fact, if you did the first one, just to do the one, just eliminate the use of negative language, your life would change. Your relationship would change.
And certainly, it certainly would help with kids, raising kids. Be positive. Be constructive in your criticism.
My daughter-in-law is a genius at this. When I'm in the era that says, if you don't eat your peas, can't get dessert. Right. My daughter-in-law says, eat a couple, and then we'll talk about dessert. Yeah. Then eat a couple more. We'll talk about dessert. Right. I mean, this is a total different approach. Guess what? He gets to eat the peas. He gets dessert. Right. See, my problem with my illustration is he gets dessert anyway. What's the lesson?
Right, exactly. Well, that happens to be true. I mean, have you ever seen a kid? No negotiator is better than a kid.
That's right.
Have you ever seen a kid negotiate bedtime? 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
5 more minutes. Okay. 3 more minutes. Okay. But that's the last. Before he's done, the kid's gotten another half hour out of you. So you have a big job to do.
It is a big job.
You have
it's
really
an interesting job, though. It's a helpful job.
Yeah. What is your? We have about a minute left. Okay. What is your background that you could?
I've been doing trouble kinds of stuff for probably 30 years. Well, not probably 30 years.
You have a very nice style yourself in doing it.
Yeah. I started in government in Minnesota.
Wow.
I actually went back to school at 31 to finish the degree program. I was so old. I was the oldest intern, so they called me the old guy.
Yeah.
And this is a very popular politician, so he had a public relations program for himself, he had a no news program for himself, and they had a bad news program, which they gave to me because I was the old guy.
You were the old guy.
And so I started out working on the problems he had.
And you practice your own steps.
Of course.
For training.
We've done it here.
That you've done it here.
That's
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. I must tell you, I'm going to thank you. I learned from you.
Good.
Okay.
My pleasure.
The book is Why Should the Boss Listen to You?
The 7 Disciplines of
the Seven Disciplines, right, of the Trusted Advisor. But the truth of the matter is, we found out that you start with number 1. Make number 1. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, Judith.
You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West. Thanks for watching.